So Bethesda has been getting a lot of interesting media coverage as of late. Of course, a lot of those articles recently are about Starfield. It was a big release this year, and to say the least, it was a bit controversial, right? It's not everyone's cup of tea. But even this latest story, though it's not about Starfield, it's still similar in the sense that it goes to the core and heart of people's frustrations with a lot of the business decisions and choices Bethesda Game Studios is making as of late. Of course, when it comes to their franchises, whether it is Starfield or even Fallout and the Elder Scrolls. And this topic that I want to talk about today is about whether Bethesda Game Studios should allow another studio or developer to work on spin-off titles for the Fallout franchise and also the Elder Scrolls franchise. This is not the first time this story has come up. It's not the first time that I've spoken about it on my channel, all right? I've talked about it many times in the past, and I'm sure you have, and you've probably thought about it as well. But the reason why it's come up now is because Chris Avellone, who, if you don't know, worked on the Fallout franchise. He was a designer in Fallout 2. He was a writer in Fallout New Vegas, project lead on a lot of the DLCs. He recently came out and made some comments about Fallout New Vegas 2 and simply them pitching, when he worked at Obsidian, them pitching to Bethesda about wanting to work on more titles like Fallout New Vegas, especially with the Elder Scrolls franchise, and that essentially being rejected by Bethesda. So I want to use this as an opportunity to talk about this topic again and to provide my perspective. I will go through all the tweets that Chris Avellone sent out so you get the full story, and then I'll go through a few points that I wanted to cover, okay? So let's start off with Chris Avellone's tweets from 2022. This is where this story began, but there are more recent tweets, as I mentioned. So Chris Avellone in a tweet said, "I know nothing about a New Vegas 2, but I do hope Bethesda allows it." Someone responds to that and says, "From everything I read, it's people up the chain at Microsoft itself getting keen on the idea." Chris responds, "I wouldn't be surprised, it's a good idea, but Bethesda never wanted to pursue it after New Vegas 1. Someone else responds, could you please share your understanding as to why this is the case? Why didn't Bethesda want Fallout New Vegas 2? Chris responds, "Oh gee, the question that kept me awake nights for years." Someone else responds, "Are you legally allowed to even answer this kind of question?" And Chris says in response, "I don't even have an answer is the point. We did ask repeatedly, even to do Elder Scrolls spin-offs in the style of Fallout New Vegas, doing side games in the same franchise or alternate worlds. Nope." So this is where this story kind of began about a year ago. And then recently, Chris has sent out even more tweets. There was a website that kind of quote tweeted a lot of these old statements by Chris, and then Chris followed up on it, right? So in response to one of these articles that was posted, Chris said the following in a tweet. "This is true. One of the Elder Scrolls proposals, which I pitched," so he has personal experience here, "was intended to serve the same function as Fallout New Vegas did between Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, to provide more adventures in the setting during the years before the next Bethesda release. I thought it couldn't hurt to try and push a similar system to what Treyarch/Activision had going with Call of Duty at the time, but hopefully less rushed. Bethesda could do a core release, then we'd release the Elder Scrolls title in the same world or a divergent timeline/era before the next big Bethesda push. Probably less relevant now that Elder Scrolls Online is going, but at the time, it seemed to be something that could benefit both studios. Not surprisingly, it didn't gain much traction. I never got the impression that Beth was happy with Fallout New Vegas' reception, good and bad." Someone then responded to Chris, "It's hard to blame them considering how broken New Vegas was at launch," and then Chris responds, "That was one of the bad points, yes. It had numerous issues at launch that we could have worked harder to resolve." So there are different things that I want to break down from these tweets, all right? This is not just like one topic. There are certain things that we need to kind of cover separately. So first of all, Chris mentioned that a lot of this was happening, possibly, due to the state of Fallout New Vegas at launch, and therefore due to Bethesda's unhappiness with the state of the game at launch. He said specifically he never got the impression that Bethesda was happy with Fallout New Vegas's reception. And I think, again, he's more referring to that initial launch period. If you don't remember, Fallout New Vegas did not have a good launch, right? It was very, very rough. From memory, in particular on PlayStation, it had a very bad time, okay? Of course, as we all know, it got fixed, right? And it's become widely regarded as one of, if not the greatest Fallout game of all time, and even one of the greatest RPGs of all time, right? It absolutely got fixed, and people still play it and mod it to this day. But possibly because of the state of the game at launch, Bethesda had an issue, and therefore they weren't comfortable or willing to allow Obsidian to work either on another Fallout title or even a spin-off title for the Elder Scrolls franchise, right? So this is interesting because, as we all know, and this of course is before the time of Fallout 76, but we all know that Bethesda game studios in particular, and let alone any Bethesda studio, right? Arcane, id Software, etc. They've all had bad launches, right? They've all had rough launches. It is not an uncommon thing in the games industry, but Bethesda game studios in particular has had their fair share of rough launches, and the pinnacle of that is Fallout 76, right? But Fallout 3 wasn't perfect, Fallout 4 wasn't perfect, Starfield wasn't perfect, even though I still believe Starfield was hugely improved in terms of bugs, etc., compared to their previous titles. It still wasn't perfect. They have all had issues. All games at launch have issues, right? It's just depending on the scale where you sit. So I find it very interesting that Bethesda wouldn't want to do another Fallout spin-off with Obsidian or another studio, or an Elder Scrolls spin-off with them or another studio, simply because at launch, Fallout New Vegas was not in a good state. I think it goes deeper than that. I refuse to believe that that is the only reason, okay? Because if that was the case, you'd never release another game again. Like, I'm not happy with this because this was a bad launch, so we're not going to do that again. Like, it's, in my eyes, it's not a reason to not try again, especially at this stage when you know how successful that title was. You know how successful and beloved Fallout New Vegas was, even though it had its issues at launch. And Cyberpunk 2077 is another example. Horrible launch, people love it now. Redemption is possible, and in my eyes, it could not have been the main reason why Bethesda didn't want to work on another Fallout spin-off title, and don't want to do that now, or don't want to do that with the Elder Scrolls franchise. I don't believe that that's the entire story, but I'm not suggesting that Chris believes that either. I think Chris said that's kind of one of the issues, but maybe there's more that goes to it, all right? So that's what I'll say about that. Now, Chris made another interesting point about saying the Elder Scrolls spin-off and the style of Fallout New Vegas probably makes less sense now that Elder Scrolls Online is a thing. And I get that. I kind of agree. When you didn't have Elder Scrolls Online, and it was going to be a huge wait between Skyrim and Elder Scrolls 6, makes even more sense to try and do an Elder Scrolls spin-off, because people are dying for more Elder Scrolls, right? But now that you have Elder Scrolls Online, there are stories being told in the Elder Scrolls franchise. There's content released constantly. Elder Scrolls Online gets so much content, it's so hard to keep up, right? And I believe they do a great job on that game. So I kind of get what Chris is saying. Right now, it makes a little bit less sense. However, as we all know, Elder Scrolls Online is not a single-player game. It is not Skyrim. It is not what Elder Scrolls 6 would be. Even though Elder Scrolls Online is a thing, and it's great, and it has a lot of fans, and it might not be your cup of tea, but it has a lot of fans. It's very successful for Bethesda. Even though that it exists right now, people would still want an Elder Scrolls spin-off game as well. So it makes less sense a little bit, but I don't think, for that reason alone, Bethesda should completely discount a spin-off Elder Scrolls title. Unless you consider it from the perspective that it might take away from the audience base and some of the success of the Elder Scrolls Online. But you know what? Elder Scrolls 6 is absolutely going to do that too. And probably by that stage, ZeniMax Online Studios is doing their next thing. Who knows if ESO is going to be supported in 4 to 5 years from now when Elder Scrolls 6 is eventually released. But all I'm saying is that the existence of ESO shouldn't preclude us from getting an Elder Scrolls spin-off game. Especially, I doubt that we're going to get anything like that before Elder Scrolls 6, because they'd have to start now. Like, if there's no Elder Scrolls spin-off title planned, or if it hasn't been in development, and even if they start right now, it would still take 4 to 5 years for that game to release. So if we were to get one, it would now probably have to be after Elder Scrolls 6, unfortunately. But at that stage, SO is less relevant, so I think it makes sense then. Now, let's talk about the topic that I've talked about many times, and it's why this topic is so contentious, right? It's the fact that when you look at Bethesda Game Studios as an individual developer and how long they take to develop titles, unfortunately, whether you like their development style, whether you like their games or not, the hard reality is it's a long, long time in between drinks. It's a long time. It takes forever for their games to release. And Todd has talked about this. It's an unfortunate reality of the games that they develop. There's honestly, I don't think there is a way to fix it aside from letting another studio or a developer work on their franchises. That's just the way that they make games. And now that we've thrown Starfield in the mix, it's even longer, right? If Starfield wasn't a thing, we'd probably have Elder Scrolls 6 by now. And now we don't, because they worked on that title. And we're not going to get that title probably for another 4 to 5 years, right? And because of that, we're not getting Fallout 5 probably for another 4 to 5 years after that, or from now, 9 to 10 years. Something like that. I'm pulling these numbers out of my ass. But it's a long time, right? And I love Bethesda Game Studios. I've defended them many, many times, okay? But on this topic, it frustrates me because if you are a fan of these franchises, you want more content. You would want more games. Main titles like Fallout 5, Elder Scrolls 6, etc., but also spin-offs as well. Anyone that's a fan would want more titles. And unfortunately, the only way to get that, as I mentioned, is by letting other studios work on the franchise. That is the only way. Bethesda Game Studios is not suddenly going to gain another 300 developers and be able to develop another title. Hiring doesn't work like that. People are letting go of staff left, right, and center at the moment in the games industry. Companies can't scale up that fast. And even if they did, they probably wouldn't still have the resources or the capacity to work on another title to the scale of Elder Scrolls 6 like Fallout 5. I don't think Bethesda Game Studios are ever going to get to the stage where they can work on 2 titles like that simultaneously. The only way is to let another studio develop a game. So I think it just needs to happen. I think, and we're going to get onto this right now, I think Microsoft in particular need to make it happen. Because if you remember, there was a story, as it was kind of referenced in those tweets towards Chris, but there was a story a while back saying how keen Microsoft themselves were on a Fallout New Vegas 2 or another Fallout spin-off title, right? And if you think, and Bethesda never wanted to pursue it according to those tweets. Of course Microsoft will want it. Like, Microsoft bought not just Bethesda Game Studios, they bought the IP. They bought Fallout and the Elder Scrolls. Of course they want more titles. Of course they want more games to support their Game Pass plans. Game Pass as a subscription service will live or die based on how much content and how many games that they get to that service. So as many as possible they would love. They would absolutely kill for a Fallout New Vegas 2 because they know what it would do to Game Pass numbers. Similar to what Starfield did, love it or hate it, it gave it a huge boost to Game Pass subscription numbers, right? As would Fallout New Vegas 2, as would an Elder Scrolls spin-off title. They absolutely would want it, and I believe those rumors where they talked about it or they said that they really wanted a Fallout New Vegas 2. I have no doubt in my mind because it makes so much sense for them as a business. They have the ability to make it happen. Yes, Bethesda is still technically independent within Xbox, and I'm sure Bethesda Game Studios and Todd Howard has a lot of sway and a lot of influence with what happens with their franchises. But if Microsoft really wanted a Fallout New Vegas 2 or an Elder Scrolls spin-off to happen, they could make it happen, and they're the only ones. They are the only ones with the influence and the ability, in my mind, to convince Bethesda Game Studios and Todd Howard to allow it to happen, all right? And it's especially because of all the studios that they have under them. You don't even need to go outside of Xbox or Microsoft to make this happen. You don't. They own, of course, Obsidian. Like, Obsidian made Fallout New Vegas. They are under Xbox, and they've openly spoken about their willingness to work on another Fallout title. And of course, Fallout New Vegas 2, I think, was the one that got mentioned. They've said that they want to do it. They want to do it. They're willing to do it. There is nothing preventing them aside from Bethesda Game Studios and Bethesda maybe not wanting them to do it right now. And again, I can't speak to the reasons why, but there's more beyond Fallout New Vegas just being rough at launch. Like, I can't believe that's the whole story. You have an incredibly talented studio like Obsidian that has the ability and they're willing to work on a Fallout spin-off or even an Elder Scrolls spin-off. I think Microsoft should just make it happen and do as much as they can to convince Todd and Bethesda Game Studios of that. The only counter to that, of course, is that Obsidian is a busy studio. They're working on Avowed and they're working on The Outer Worlds too, right? And probably a bunch of other stuff. They did Pentiment and a few other things. Like, it's not like they're sitting on their hands doing nothing. So if they wanted to work on Fallout New Vegas 2 or an Elder Scrolls spin-off, something else would have to be displaced or replaced. And it would still take a while. If planning started now, if development started now, it would still be like 4 to 5 years off. And it couldn't, because Avowed and The Outer Worlds 2 would probably need to finish first. I can't see Obsidian willing to give up their own IP so willingly just to be able to work on Fallout or The Elder Scrolls, right? And so I know that they're busy, but it can happen down the line. What I really want is for us, eventually, it can't happen now. I've accepted that, and we all need to accept that. It can't happen within the next 4 or 5 years. But eventually, I do want to see, for Fallout, Elder Scrolls, and heck, even Starfield, a semi-frequent release of spin-off titles for those franchises. In between, Fallout 4 is obviously already released, but in between Fallout 4 and Fallout 5, I want another Fallout spin-off. And the only way is to give it to Obsidian or in exile, right? Like, Microsoft have so many talented studios under them. They literally have In Exile that works on Wasteland. A very, very similar gaming concept to Fallout. If Obsidian don't have the time or the ability to, get In Exile to work on a Fallout franchise. Yes, they do a lot of top-down isometric games, but so what? They're talented devs. They can share knowledge. They're able to do it. They absolutely have the capacity and the capability to do so. They are working on Clockwork Revolution at the moment, but absolutely after that, they could work on Fallout. If Obsidian still really want to do that Elder Scrolls spin-off that they kind of pitched towards, at least Chris Avellone pitched, but let's say Obsidian as a whole pitched towards Bethesda Game Studios, have them do that and have In Exile work on a Fallout game. Or have Obsidian do both, like whatever. All I'm saying is that you have someone like In Exile that have the ability to do so as well, right next to Obsidian. Right now, in my mind, there is just no excuse why this can't happen. It can't happen. I'm just tired of waiting for another Fallout game. And I love Bethesda. I'll always be a fanboy. I'm a self-admitted fanboy. I continue to defend them on many topics, okay? And people call me a fanboy for that reason, that's fine. But this is the one topic I can't see eye to eye with them. As a fan of these franchises, I just want more titles. And I'm not asking for like the world here. I'm not asking for a title every year. No one wants that. No one wants Call of Duty style games releasing for Fallout or the Elder Scrolls. I'm asking for something more frequent than once every 10 years, which is what we're going to get now, or something ridiculous like that. So anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you enjoy this more kind of discussion-based video. I'm really enjoying them. I'm enjoying just kind of talking to the camera and speaking about topics that I'm interested in. But until next time, this has been the Lone Bolt Wanderer. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.